The following program, The Russ Belville Show, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on The Russ Belville Show are their own, and The Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Brought to you by the National Cannabis Coalition.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
All right, good day, tokers and tokettes, and welcome. It is Friday, August 3rd, 2012, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us here for the Russ Belville Show on National Cannabis Radio, a part of the National Cannabis Coalition. Check out ncc420.com for more details. There's going to be so much great stuff coming up on National Cannabis Coalition in the upcoming months. You'll want to be there on the ground floor. It's great stuff coming up. Anyway, welcome to the show. We're winding up the week. It's Friday. We're glad to have you here, and we're finishing up our legalization week. It's our look at the 5 states that are moving forward with legalization and the city of Springfield, Missouri. And today we are taking a look at the state of Montana, Big Sky country, where they have a initiative referendum that they are voting on to restore the old medical marijuana law the way it used to be. However, some interesting decisions from the Montana Supreme Court means that the law isn't really what it used to be, even if they pass this thing. We'll tell you all about that at the end of the show today in today's Radical Rant. Also on today's show, we've got Steve Bloom from CelebStoner.com for our Celeb Stoner Entertainment Report. He's going to tell us the latest in celebrities, actors, musicians, sports heroes, and their involvement with cannabis. We'll get all the latest updates from him and CelebStoner.com. And then we've got, before that, at 20 after, it's Rockin' Friday. We got Herb Thrasher coming on the show. He'll give us the latest updates on his show coming up later tonight. Plus, we've got some news for the world of metal fans out there that are following the Lamb of God case. You want to check that out on Herb Thrasher's show tonight. We'll have some Rockin' Friday music from him at 20 after. But before we get to all of that, first, let's introduce the people in the studio. Sitting over in the engineer's desk today, we have got Wiz Kaliko. How you doing, Kaliko?
Oh, I'm doing quite well. Happy to be here and very happy it is Friday.
It's a very good day. And from our virtual studio in Astoria, Oregon, we've got Carrie Gallagher, our news director. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, guys. Happy Friday. We made it.
Yes, we've made it all the way. It's been a lot of news has popped up. We're going to get some updates on that shocking Chavis Carter case, the just shocking case that now I guess the FBI is getting involved as well. We'll talk about that a bit. But before all of that, we got to get to the latest headlines of the day. Carrie's got that in our Cannabis Chronicle. So what's coming up after the break?
You bet. I'm really excited because one of my favorite subjects, we're going to talk about industrial hemp today. Oh. Also, since it's Friday, I've got 2 different stories with some international headlines that have to do with cannabis and cannabis culture. But first up, I have a congresswoman from California who is doing what she can to help ease the burden of those California landlords that have been in so much trouble this last year, Russ. That all coming up today.
All right, great news there. We've got to also remember to support those congressmen, those representatives that are trying to help us out. They need to hear from you, and we can help you do it. Just go to National Cannabis Coalition and get involved. You can text RUSS, R-U-S-S, to 420-420, and that'll be an easy way for you to link up through your cell phone. You can also make donations to help us fund the show. Speaking of funding the show, we're 2 weeks away. Today, we're 2 weeks away from Seattle Hemp Fest. We'll be bringing you live coverage of that as well. Make sure you check us out 17th, 18th, and 19th right here at ncr420.com for live coverage all day I'm not exactly sure how many cameras and how many stages we'll be at. We're still working all that out, but it's going to be great. So when we come back, we will have your Daily Cannabis Chronicle. Stick around. It's the Russ Belville Show. We'll be right back.
It's simply business. It's simply business. You know why they won't let us grow. It's simply business.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Brought to you by the National Cannabis Coalition.
It's simply business. It's simply business. It's simply business. You know why they won't let us grow. It's simply business. It's simply business. You know why they won't let us grow. It's simply business.
Support the Russ Belville Show. Text the word Russ to 420-420 and connect with the National Cannabis Coalition. You can also send $10 to the Russ Belville Show right from your smartphone. That's Russ to 420-420. You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show.
I'll say little red carpet, darling, your mud's too fast. Little red carpet, you need a lover that's gonna lay.
The children! My God! Won't somebody think of the children?
Marijuana's not going to re-legalize itself. You've got to do your part. Join the National Cannabis Coalition today at nationalcannabiscoalition.com. Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, ganja sacrament, consumer cannabis. The topic of marijuana is heating up the news, and the Russ Belville Show catches you up with today's latest headlines. Now, here's our senior news editor, Cannabis Carey, with the Daily Cannabis Chronicle.
Legislation was introduced yesterday in an attempt to protect property owners of state-compliant medical marijuana businesses from seizures. U.S. attorneys in several medical marijuana states have been sending threatening letters to landlords of medical marijuana businesses, telling them that they might face criminal charges and property seizures. This latest tactic that we began seeing in 2010 has successfully closed down hundreds of dispensaries and at least 400 in California alone. Congresswoman Barbara Lee from California, along with 8 co-sponsors, has introduced H.R. 6335, called the State's Medical Marijuana Property Rights Protection Act. U.S. Attorney Melinda Haig, acting for the U.S. Justice Department, served asset forfeiture papers against the landlords of Harborside Health, one of the largest dispensaries in the state, and one that is a model of good regulation. Now, that California U.S. Attorney served those papers against the will of Representative Lee and the Oakland City Council, the Oakland City Attorney, and the Board of Equalization. Lee said in a statement today that we should be protecting the will of the voters, not undermining our democracy by prosecuting small business owners who pay taxes and comply with the laws of their state in providing medicine to patients in need. Now, if passed by Congress, H.R. 6335 would prohibit the federal government from specifically using the civil asset forfeiture statute to go after property owners if their tenants are in compliance with state medical marijuana laws. Now, that would leave any landlords who have tenants that may not be complying with the state medical marijuana laws still in jeopardy. Property owners still have a chance to get their seized property back in a civil court if they can prove they had no connection to the crime. Landlords are still, though, not afforded some of the constitutional rights that are granted to criminal defendants, like the right to a jury trial. And also the burden of proof lies with the property owner, who must prove their innocence, not like a criminal trial where the burden is on the government to prove that they are guilty.
Well, it's about time we got some legislation like this, because this goes right to the heart of the latest attack against medical marijuana and providers here. You know, they knew they couldn't go after the providers themselves because they're more than willing to be, shall we say, martyrs for the cause in this case. That prosecuting them just boosts the profile of medical marijuana, boosts the profile of people that are supporting it, and casts the government in the light of being the bad guys that are going after sick people. No, a lot easier to send these little letters to landlords threatening their bottom line. You know, landlords who really, in a lot of cases, could care less if it's medical marijuana or an auto parts store. They don't care. They just want to see somebody there paying the rent, you know, paying the mortgage for them. So, you know, Representative Lee, make sure we get some support for her. Check it out at house.gov, Representative Barbara Lee, and you can send your support. Let her know that she's doing the right thing. She has support all across the country for this. This is what has to happen, is we have to change this, you know, bit by bit, law by law, and your support for her could be, you know, very helpful for her campaign.
Eric Strinstead, the president of Vote Hemp and the executive director of the Hemp Industries Association, wrote a piece this week that highlights that one of the items listed in the Obama campaign store for sale is an organic hemp scarf. Strinstead took the opportunity to remind us that even though the product proudly bears the Made in the USA label, that industrial hemp cannot be grown here in America. The item that's raising money for the re-election efforts of the current administration was made from imported hemp fabric from China. Industrial hemp has been lumped in with marijuana and has remained illegal as a crop to cultivate, even as the U.S. has come out as the world's largest market for hemp products. The estimated market for hemp products in the U.S. is $419 million and growing annually at around 10%. Every hemp product sold in the U.S. started its life somewhere outside of our borders and outside of the reach of the American farmer. The Chinese hemp industry has been operating for well over 1,000 years, yet the recent appetite for hemp products here in the U.S. has led China to expand their hemp output. To keep up with American demand of hemp cloth, Chinese farmers are expanding their country's 150,000 acres of hemp to more than 1 million acres this year. Canadian farmers who are also allowed to grow hemp are finally seeing a payoff in recent years as they are recording record profits from the crop that's banned just south of their border. European farmers are selling their hemp fiber to Ford, Chrysler, and BMW for door panels and interior products. And the expanding hemp foods market has experienced explosive growth in the specialty food sector, all made with imported hemp seeds. 10 different states have removed barriers to production of industrial hemp, yet the federal government bans the planting of hemp. State governments have tried to work with the current administration to implement those state programs, but have yet even been able to get a meeting. Oregon Senator Ron Wyden tried to add industrial hemp to this year's farm bill, asking that American farmers no longer be denied the opportunity to grow and sell a legitimate agricultural crop just because it resembles an illegal one. Senator Wyden's hemp farming amendment was ultimately cut from the farm bill because it was considered a different subject than farming. Wyden has expressed his frustration that farmers need to amend the Controlled Substances Act to grow the useful crop. Industrial hemp can be used in fabric, foods, fuels, and construction materials. It can also replace trees to produce paper products using much less land, resources, and water. For information on hemp issues, please visit votehemp.org. They've been leaders in political issues surrounding hemp and are a great source of information.
Wow. Let me see if I got that right. We can't bring up Senator Wyden's amendment on hemp because it's a different subject than farming. Did I get that right, Carrie?
That's right, because it's under the Controlled Substances Act, and they need to go there first and fix that first before we can call it farming.
Oh, the absurdity of prohibition strikes once again, and nowhere is it more absurd than the banning of a drug or of a non-drug under a drug act, right? The Drug Enforcement Administration, Controlled Substances Act, banning hemp as a drug when it's not a drug. In fact, the concentration of THC that you'd find in hemp is less than the concentration of alcohol that you find in a near beer, right? So it's not even close to being something that could get someone high. And actually, that's a bit to the detriment of hemp. It really is. You know, the THC that you produce, that the hemp plant produces, is kind of its own natural sunscreen against UV rays, right? So if you really wanted to grow a great, strong hemp fiber crop, you'd want the THC to be above, you know, about 1%, maybe a little less than 1%. But because of all these fears of drugs and fears of, oh my God, someone that has hemp might, you know, trip a drug test or something, the hemp industries around the world have agreed to this 0.3% THC limit. It has to be less than or equal to 0.3% THC, which actually produces a weaker hemp. Even though it's still a great product, it's not as great as it could be because of these stupid drug laws. Banning hemp because it looks like marijuana is like banning powdered sugar because it looks like cocaine. It makes no sense, and it needs to end sooner rather than later.
And we have an update on an international story that we brought you a few weeks ago. A group of cannabis farmers in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley had armed themselves to protect their cannabis crops from a militarized attack from their government's marijuana eradication team a few weeks ago. The Bekaa Valley was once the world's largest producer of hash from 1975 to 1990, but with the end of the Lebanese Civil War, a United Nations program from 91 to 93 completely eradicated cannabis crops from the valley. Since then, it has slowly returned just a little at a time, along with the poppy plants that can be used to eventually produce heroin and opium. Marijuana is a perfect crop for the Bekaa Valley. It's very easy to grow with little need for pesticides or large water resources. Farmers in the now impoverished country have little opportunity to make any money off of traditional crops in that community. Lebanese officials showed up 2 weeks ago with security forces, tractors, and armored vehicles ready to rip out and flatten this year's cannabis crop. But the farmers had taken up arms to ward off the attack with assault rifles and rocket-propelled grenades. They protected their crops and bullets were exchanged, and although no casualties or injuries were reported, 2 security vehicles were sprayed with bullets. Lebanese officials say that the increased firepower of the farmers is due to drug traffickers who are all well-funded since the crops have become even more lucrative as the economy struggles. The Lebanese government went back this morning, and even with more forces to trample that valley's crops, about 30 bulldozers took part in that crackdown that kicked off at 8 a.m. Residents tried to block the motorcade with burning tires in the roads to protest the latest crackdown that put authority off a few hours. They did finally get through. 2 policemen and 2 soldiers were wounded today in separate shootings over the crackdown. The brief shootouts occurred after negotiations with the farmers who were trying to convince the security forces to leave broke down. Many of the farmers, fearing prosecution, have fled into the mountains surrounding the region. Forces say that they are targeting about 8,600 acres of cannabis fields scattered around the valley, and after today's efforts, they report that about 1,500 acres of those crops have been destroyed. Now, the farmers and the soldiers are up against time. Those crops are ready to harvest, Russ, in about 30 days.
Yeah, in the Bekaa Valley, I guess it's burning tires in the streets. In San Francisco, it's mock funerals for dispensaries. This international issue here of these people, these poor farmers that probably have, living on what we would spend on, a nice lunch. That's their monthly income or something. Why? Why do we have to stop them from growing this? Why can this not be a legal crop that could benefit so many people and so much of our planet and our ecology here? These people need jobs. They need subsistence. They need economies. And to stop them from doing this, and to furthermore, the amount of effort that it takes, the amount of effort these governments spend around the world trying to eradicate something that could be so beneficial in so many ways, it's just, the more you report on it, the more it's like not just a crime, but, a crime against humanity.
And we have one more story, another quick international headline that caught my attention. Myanmar, or Burma, the country nestled between India, Bangladesh, Thailand, and China, has a group sentencing this week of 92 Thai nationals for coming into the country with the intent to grow illegal crops. Now, the verdict was issued this week in Myanmar's southern tip, and all 82 men and 10 women will have to spend the next 3.5 years in a Burma prison. The Thai diplomats have requested to visit with detainees, but those requests have yet to be granted. The Thais were arrested in July during a military operation for reportedly trying to grow rubber trees on 1,500 acres of land, and they also accused the rubber tree farmers of being armed with automatic rifles. But local Thai media outlets are reporting that members of the group were actually growing marijuana instead. Now, there are still 10 remaining Thai defendants that were detained in that July July raid that are still waiting for their sentences. And speculation is that the remaining 10 will be facing additional narcotics charges of growing marijuana, along with possessing war weapons. Their sentences are expected to be much longer. The detainees are all being held in Van Kyle Mile Prison, a very old building with an earth floor, a tin roof, and surrounded by barbed wire fences, a 32-foot wide ditch, and the only meal served is boiled rice and soybean soup. Many prisoners die in this prison each year as it is infested with mosquitoes, cockroaches, and rats. Diseases easily spread with the open pit toilets. Former prisoners call it the most hellish prison in the country. Unfortunate.
Yeah, and that these people are going to have to go through that once again when there's no rational basis for doing so in the first place. Just a kind of a need to be cruel to other people, I guess.
It's 420 back in Idaho, where Russ and Carrie were born. So we have to go connect with our roots. You know what I mean? Please support these sponsors who support the Russ Belville Show.
Oh, have you ever met that?
All right, when we come back, we got Herb Thrasher and our Rockin' Friday, too. Thanks for tuning in here to the Russ Belville Show. We'll be right back after these messages.
If he said he swam to China, he would send you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. Please do not give up your precious liberties. There's nothing wrong with standing up for our constitutional rights, and in fact, it's the only way to honor the Constitution that recognizes our natural rights. Treat law enforcement with respect and respect the Constitution by standing up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak to my attorney, Omar Figueroa." Omar Figueroa has more than a decade of experience in federal and California courts and graduated from Yale University, Stanford Law School, and Trial Lawyers College. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at www.omarfigueroa.com.
Michael Phelps, Olympic superstar, 14 gold medals, world record holder. Bomb smoker. So much for that amotivational syndrome.
Speaking of Michael Phelps and gold medals, spoiler alert, tune out if you don't want to hear. But Michael's now got, what, 21, Kaliko? 21 medals. If only he hadn't smoked pot, he might have been able to do something with his life.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Rockin' Friday, featuring rock, metal, and the hard edge of alternative country. You can get downloads and more information about all our Daily Toker Tunes by visiting music.radicalruss.com. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tune.
All right, folks, welcome back. It's 23 after. We don't have Herb on the line today, unfortunately. He might still be trapped at work or unable to dial out. That happens sometimes. But he did want me to get a song out for you and to remind you to tune in to tonight's Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, 8 o'clock Pacific Time. Special guest tonight, Vivian McPeak, the Executive Director of the Seattle Hemp Fest, which is taking place 2 weeks from today. And we'll be covering it here live at National Cannabis Radio, ncr420.com. And one of the bands that will be performing at one of the 6 different stages, I believe they'll be on the main stage, Seattle Hemp Fest main stage, 1 o'clock on Sunday, is this band out of Seattle, right, from hometown band, a rock, hip-hop, funk, 5-member band known as Iron Mike 206. 206, of course, being the area code for that area. And they're a hard and fast band, rapidly becoming one of the Northwest's hardest working bands. Entering the fourth quarter of their first year, they've written, recorded, and released a self-titled debut album, unveiled the first in a series of music videos, and they facilitated several multi-city tours crossing state lines, frequenting some of the Western Washington's premier venues, all while continuing to grow like their diverse catalog of performance-ready material. Currently, Iron Mike 206 is working on their sophomore release, keeping details a closely guarded secret. And they say their freshman album that we're going to be playing a song here from just fell together. They'll be part of the Under Armour Third Rail Jam Tour lineup. They'll be in Mount Hood here too, and part of the Hard Rock Rising 2012 competition. This is Iron Mike 206 performing Seattle Hemp Fest, Seattle, 1 o'clock Sunday at the Hemp Fest. That'll be the 19th. We'll be covering it as well. I'm sure Herb will. This is Iron Mike 206 with Spread My Wings for your Rockin' Friday.
I'ma pack my things, spread my wings, open my third eye wide and see what dreams bring. It ain't like me if it ain't like green. Crisp white tee with some Nikes like these. Erase state lines, I feel like each state's mine. Toast with my folks, we always have a great time. Drink inside my cup, smoke in the air, and I'm on my way up them stairs like I don't care. Put a stack on black, better don't come back. Strap on my jetpack and sky right on the track. My face in the wind, count backwards from 10. I got that Northwest special plan. Pint of hand on a one-way red, I like Final Destination. I windsurf airwaves with no hesitation. Hang glide hook, sharpen my teeth on break beats. Disappearing clouds, I won't be seen for 8 weeks. I'ma spread my wings and fly. Fly, 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 fly. Yeah. I'ma spread my wings and fly. Fly, fly, fly. I was in way above my head, they always said. If love cuts like a knife, believe me, I'm glad. I've been up shit's creek and down on my luck, refuse to lose. You couldn't walk a mile of my chucks. They hate on what they fear what they don't understand. I try my best just to adhere to God's plan. Keep my head high, hustle and grind. Trust that time will bring me where I need to reach before I die. Stay humble, get my skrill, pay my bills. I'll never let nobody tell me there's no work in my field. Friday get his in like Russ and Joe Simmons. Go hard to the ninth inning, collect my winnings. No pulling on that one arm bandit, breaking even. I purged all my demons and searched far for reasons. Came to conclusions, stitched up contusions. When you got shit ruined, and watch what you doing. I'ma spread my wings and fly. Fly, 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 fly. Yeah. I'ma spread my wings and fly. Fly, fly, fly.
Hi, this is Dan Michaels. If you're looking for professional voice talent for your commercial or podcast, I'm your man. Visit danmichaelsaudio.com for more information.
I like it like that.
Well, I don't know what you came to do, but what we came to do.
That's right, baby. We're keeping the funk alive right here at Big Daddy Fink's Funky Roller Ring. National Cannabis Radio's home of soul, funk, and disco. So join me, Big Daddy, every Thursday night, 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, at the Funky Roller Ring, where every night is Saturday night.
The world of entertainment includes many actors, musicians, athletes, and celebrities who find their way into the world of weed. The Russ Belville Show catches you up with the latest with Steve Bloom and the CelebStoner.com Entertainment Report.
All right, welcome back, everybody, and we want to welcome back Steve Bloom to the show from CelebStoner.com. Steve, how you doing?
Russ, great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. You know, of course, the big sports story going on right now, the Olympics. We got Michael Phelps winning medals again, and I'm sure there's a lot to talk about. What should we open up with here?
Well, Phelps is fine with me. It's been a good week for the top celeb stoners between Michael Phelps and Snoop Dogg being in the news, two of our favorites. Phelps, of course, has been a little bit out of the news the last few years, ever since his bong hitting incident. But he, has been preparing for the Olympics for the last couple of years. And, he got up to sort of a slow start, as people probably know. But he won another gold today. So now that's 3 golds, 2 silvers. And with one more race to go. So he's not going to exactly pull off a Beijing where he had 8 golds and 8 events. So this year, a little bit, less, in performance for him, but still, pretty significant considering it's his 3rd time around. Now he's at 21 medals, the most medals ever by any Olympian. And here's a guy who, as we all know, likes to have a bong hit once in a while, and it probably helps him when he goes in the water.
Yeah, hit the roar like a champ. You mentioned...
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned real briefly Snoop Dogg, who we've been reporting on, who's now, I guess, Snoop Lion, and you've got this really cool giveaway. I noticed the green 45s. Tell people about that.
Well, Snoop Dogg has gone through a transformation, or what he calls an awakening. He is now calling himself Snoop Lion, or Burhane, which is a name that was given to him by a Rasta elder when he went to Jamaica recently. So his first song from the new album, Reincarnated, is called La La La, and it's a roots reggae song, kind of a 70s style roots song, and they press 1,962 copies of this single as a tribute to the year that Jamaica had its independence. So it's a limited edition 45 with a green vinyl. So when I was at the press conference this week, they were giving away the 45. So I grabbed a couple of extra for their fans of Celeb Stoner so that we could do a contest. So we have 3 copies of that 45 limited edition La 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 by Snoop Lion, plus Snoop Dogg's own line of custom-made rolling papers, which I was able to grab as well at the press conference. So that's usually the promotions come, somebody sends you everything in the mail and you do a giveaway. This time I grabbed everything and now we're doing a giveaway.
That's very good.
So they didn't quite know what they were getting into when they let all these things, put everything out on the counter there, and I just started grabbing, pilfering. But the plan was, to give it away to those Celeb Stoner readers. What's interesting about what Snoop Dogg is doing is that he's calling it an awakening, and he's referring to Bob Marley quite a bit. And he even said, "I've always said I'm Bob Marley reincarnated," which is kind of a controversial statement to compare himself to Bob Marley. First of all, to compare himself to that legendary status. So of course, Snoop's a legend in his own world of hip hop, but not obviously in reggae, and also, just to, take on that idea that he has some kind of kinship with Bob is something that I don't think most of us really knew about. But, he says that reggae was always something I had in my music. Now that I'm able to do it, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's a challenge at the same time. Rap's not appealing to me anymore. I had enough of that. He says, I'm Uncle Snoop in rap. When you get to be an uncle, you have to find a new profession and start over. So, but at the press conference, I thought it was interesting that he had chosen to align himself with a production team called Major Lazer, who have done a lot of work with Beyonce and Usher, MIA, and Sentigold, and a lot of pretty well-known cutting-edge artists, and mainstream artists as well. Now Snoop has a connection to the Major Lazer production team, so they contacted Major Lazer when they decided they wanted to do this Jamaican album. Now, interestingly, at the press conference, Rohan Marley was there, and Rohan is one of the non-singing brothers who football. You probably remember this for the University of Miami. And so Rohan was sitting there, and they introduced him, while they introduced everybody else who was sort of there as part of the press conference, but Rohan was just sitting in the crowd. And so I thought it would be an interesting question to ask, no disrespect to Diplo, who is the leader of that Major Lazer team, who was there, and everybody else who worked on this project, but with all the references to Bob Marley being
It seemed to have some sort of a connection problem there for just a second. We'll see if that comes back. Give it some time to work out. The only question I would have for Snoop Lion, if I had the chance to ask him about this whole reincarnation issue, is that Bob Marley died in 1981 and Snoop Lion was born in 1971. So how does that reincarnation work? Maybe after a few years, everything gets I don't know. Anyway, you want to...
Going on.
Hey, Steve, there we go. We had a connection difficulty there for just a second, though, but you're back.
But what I wanted to say is that, when I asked Snoop Dogg that question, he says, I've always said I'm Bob Marley reincarnated. The Marleys blessed me. They understood that I was coming home. I've always been their brother. For them to see me come home, it was like our brother has finally awakened. He's really with us now. So what happened to Snoop, according to what he said, was that he went to, he had this idea about doing a reggae project. He goes to Jamaica to sort of, dig deeper into, the idea of doing it. This is something he could really pull off. They take him to the Nyabingi drumming temple, or a place where where the elders sit around and do their slow drumming and they smoke the chalice. And at that event, he was taken aside by the elder who said, "You're no longer Snoop Dogg. You're Snoop Lion. You're Burhane. It's like, I'm not sure what Burhane means, but he said it's the light, the lion." And so, he took this as this message, to move ahead with this project, that, he was embraced by the elders there who saw, what Snoop Dogg was trying to do. Now, whether Snoop can really pull it off is another thing. The single is a good single, but we haven't heard the whole album. So we really don't know too much about, all the elements of the album, but with the people involved, I'm sure it's a good record, and I'm sure it is a faithful record to the to the roots style. And the producer basically said he didn't even know what they were getting into with Snoop. Did he want to do dance hall? Did he want to do something more roots? But they steered him more in the roots direction. I think that's what he wanted. And then the other piece of the package was that they contacted Vice Media, the Vice magazine and Vice, films and records and whatever, and they contacted them, asking them to get involved with the project to shoot this while they were down in Jamaica. And they thought it was going to be a short-form video to back up the release of the album. As it turned out, they put together a feature-length documentary called Reincarnated. They submitted it to the Toronto Film Festival, and it was accepted. So there's a Snoop Dogg movie documentary. It's now been, I guess, completed, or at least they submitted, most of it, and maybe they're finishing up and getting it ready for the September festival. So there's so much going on with Snoop Dogg. It's a very exciting, step for him. Whether it's fair for him to call himself Bob Marley is another thing. It's kind of controversial. A lot of people, look at it as like, how dare he? But at the same time, the guy is probably the most prodigious marijuana smoker in the whole world of hip-hop, and certainly Bob was in the world of reggae, so they do have that in common.
You got that, for sure. You had a...
It was also, by the way, it was very interesting how Snoop kind of was stepping away from hip-hop. He was asked a question, are you never going to make a hip-hop album again? He said, no, I didn't say that, but he felt that he had done everything he possibly could in hip-hop. He's the number one guy, number 5, number 10. He's accomplished everything. I think he just bored. Like, what else can I do in that arena? I'm not saying he'll never go back to hip-hop, hip-hop, and I'm not saying he's going to do 5 reggae albums in a row, but he seemed to be distancing himself from his past. And he even has a song on the new album called No Guns Allowed or something like that, taking a stance against violence. You know, he said, I thought I was going to make another gangster album. I thought I was going to make another hip-hop album, another pimp album, and lo and behold, he was, taken by the spirit that, led him in this new direction. So whether he's making it all up and it's a little game or not, who knows? But it seems like something worth following. Let's follow Snoop on his ride, through the world of Jamaica and reggae.
Oh yeah, we played some of the new Snoop Lion on the Irie Island Hour show on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. You've got another headline up there in the top news stories that just caught my eye because we reported on the passing of Sherman Helmsley, and love the headline here. Sherman Helmsley dug LSD and marijuana. Of course, Sherman Helmsley being from, people know him as George Jefferson from the Jeffersons.
Right. Well, I saw that popping up, after Sherman Helmsley passed away. I saw that popping up as a story in a couple of places, and I went, through the layers of links to find where it originally came from, and it came from an interview that was done in Magnet magazine in 1999 by a good friend of mine, Mitch Myers, a guy who I've known for years, who wrote a great book called Free Bird. He's a really great music journalist and, a close friend of mine, and I really didn't know. Maybe he'd told me about this thing. Well, what happened was back in the 70s, the group Gong, which is a kind of a lesser-known British rock band psychedelic band from the early 70s, led by a guy named David Allen, who had an album called Flying Teapot, and on that album was Pothead Pixies, which, by the way, is on Compilation, the first album. A version of Pothead Pixies was done by Raging Slab. I had never heard this until Raging Slab said they wanted to do Pothead Pixies. So that kind of was what got me to know Gong. Well, turns out Sherman Helmsley was a fan of that era of rock, and who would have thought, here's a guy who was sort of representing, moving on up, uptown and upperly mobile movement for African Americans. You'd figure he was probably an Al Green fan more than he was a Gong fan.
Yeah, really.
But and I'm sure he was. But as it turns out, he had an interest in this music, and so he, out of the blue, contacted David Allen and said, "I'd like to promote you here in the West Coast." Now, David Allen was living on some farm in Spain. He was from England, and he got this phone call, and Allen figured, okay, I'll go for it. The guy's willing to fly me to California. I'll take the free trip. But hey, by the way, can you, steer us through Jamaica? Him and his girlfriend, because they wanted to make a stop in Jamaica. They came to L.A. and they are greeted by Helmsley in a limousine at the airport, and immediately Helmsley breaks out a big joint and it's being passed around, and it comes to David Allen. Allen says no, and he says, "I don't smoke marijuana," and Helmsley was blown away. It's like, wait a second, the guy who created all this weird, trippy, psychedelic music doesn't smoke pot? Well, nevertheless, he was a little disappointed, but they went home. He stayed at his place, and he said the house was had an LSD lab. It was at the time when freebase was popular. It wasn't really crack. They were making freebase. They were doing all kinds of drugs in this house. So it was pot, LSD, cocaine, freebase, all floating around this house. And so he just said that the people around him were just kind of lunatics. He didn't really like the scene, and he kind of. But before he did that, he did have a meeting with some Hollywood producer who was going to help him promote his music. And, Allen just didn't really like the whole scene. He just kind of respected the fact that Helmsley was into his music, but he didn't really care for what all the people at Helmsley and what they were doing. So that's kind of how that story was told, little did we know of his interest in this era of classic rock and the drugs that surrounded him in his life, at least at that time. So that's really where I picked that story up, thanks to my friend Mitch Myers, who recorded the interview with David Allen back in 1999 and had it published in Magnet.
Wow, that's great stuff. Hey, one other question that's just coming out of our chat room. They wanted to know about weeds, and in season 8, who dies?
Well, nobody's died, as it turned out. Nancy was shot in the end of season 7. She survived it. I think it's a little like Gabby Gifford. Here's a woman who gets shot in the head and survived. They haven't made any allusions to her, but I think, that's where, if you thought it's not possible, well, look what happened to Gabby Gifford. She survived. So did Nancy Botwin, Mary Louise Parker's character. And, it's another sort of strange, weird season for Weeds. Where it's going, nobody knows. But I have seen, some of the advanced episodes going through, say, Sunday, and they're steering in a direction where they're on the marijuana side of the storyline. Silas is the grower, and he has a grow room, and he meets a guy. He's going to buy some nutrients at a store. He meets a grow geek type guy who they become friends. Next thing you know, the grow geek guy rips off Silas's plants. So now Silas doesn't have any plants, and he's freaking out. And then Nancy steers him in another direction. She meets a guy who's buying some weed from somebody at a soccer game, like the way, kind of coming around the full circle to the beginning of the show when Nancy would sell pot, at soccer games, for, soccer moms and dads. And turns out one of the guys that she meets works for a pharmaceutical company, and lo and behold, what are they doing? They're working on a formula for medical marijuana, similar to GW Pharmaceutical, where it's a THC, whole plant-based medication made for use for medical use. So as it will turn out, it looks like Silas will start working for this company and sort of go on the inside now. And so it is following a little bit of the lead of some of the stuff that's been happening out there with the news out of Israel, with the THC-free marijuana, so to speak, and, what Sativex and GW Pharmaceuticals are doing. So they are following the news. But the storyline's kind of an odd storyline. I don't find it very compelling. And honestly, most of the characters are not very, likable at this point. There's really just nobody to really root for in that storyline. I don't know if they're going to go out with a bang, but...
Well, we will find out. Hey, Steve Bloom, I want to thank you for joining us here from celebstoner.com, Celebstoner Entertainment Report. We'll get you back in a couple weeks and update us on the athletes. I know NFL training camp will be started. We'll have to get the pigskin potheads back up and running. And thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Russ. Take care.
All right. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the veto referendum in Montana to conclude our legalization week. Stick around. It's the Russ Belville Show.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson, and I need your help. Our marijuana laws are terribly unfair, and they make criminals out of law-abiding citizens. Nearly 2,000 Americans are arrested every day on marijuana charges, and we are unfairly destroying the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of people simply because they smoke marijuana. These are not criminals. They are average citizens like you, good neighbors who work hard, raise families, pay taxes, and contribute to their communities. And it's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. We need your help to end marijuana prohibition once and for all. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
You want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
Liberate your mind. Liberate your mind.
You want answers? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And You have offended Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical rant. All right, welcome back. We're concluding our legalization week with a look at Montana referendum IR 124, which is confusing in a few ways. And the first is in that you have to vote no to say yes to going back to the old way of having medical marijuana. And the second confusing part is even if you do vote no and it goes back to the old medical marijuana, it's not really going back to the old medical marijuana. We'll explain that second part in just a little bit, but I want to start by pointing out that a lot of this information is coming from the Montana Cannabis Industries Association blog. You can find that at mtcia.org, Montana Cannabis Industries Association, mtcia.org, where they have just put out a new billboard in the Billings area, Billings, Montana. A great billboard you can see there. Says, welcome to Yellowstone County, where the will of the people doesn't count. Vote no on IR 124. And what they're referring to is that this initiative referendum would repeal a bill that was called I 148. Would repeal a 423 bill and go back to the original I 148. So lots of numbers and letters floating around here. Let me just get it in nice and simple language for you. The original Montana medical marijuana, as it existed, is what led to, the industry that developed around it, patients taking care, caregivers taking care of patients, dispensaries and so forth. The Montana legislature tried to outright repeal medical marijuana. They were unable to do so because the governor vetoed that successful effort. They actually were ready to repeal the entire medical marijuana program, but the governor vetoed it. So they came up with this Senate Bill 423, which was dubbed by opponents Repeal Light, for what it did was create severe restrictions on the medical marijuana program, which to this point so far has reduced the patient rolls and decimated the caregiver rolls, so that far fewer people have safe access to their medicine. So what this referendum is to vote whether or not the people also support that 423. Do the people support the new medical marijuana law? So if you vote yes on IR 124 in Montana, you're saying, yes, this new repeal light is the way that it should be. We should repeal the old law and have this new, more restrictive law. If you vote no, you're saying, I'm against Senate Bill 423. I don't want this new medical marijuana law. Let's go back to the original medical marijuana law that we wanted. So you have to be very sure about that if you're a voter there in Montana, that it's voting no is going to get your medical marijuana back to the way it was in some respects. And that's where we come to this second part of this Montana medical marijuana situation, which, again, coming from Montana Cannabis Industries Association blog, that a lot of the law that existed, or at least that people thought existed in the Montana Medical Marijuana Act, has been changed and updated by 3 decisions at the Montana Supreme Court, a recent string of cases that have been heard that in every case takes a very harsh stand against an open interpretation, or more what we would consider a reasonable interpretation of the state's medical marijuana law. So even if this is repealed, even if the SB 423 is repealed and we go back to the way the old medical marijuana law was, the way that's now been interpreted by the Supreme Court will mean a medical marijuana landscape in Montana that is much more restricted than it used to be. Here's the scary part. As I describe these next 3 cases, recognize, and again, this is from Montana Cannabis Industry Association blog, they say, under Montana law, anyone charged with a criminal offense is subject to the law in effect at the time of the alleged offense. Because felony charges can be brought for up to 5 years from the date of the activity at issue, providers who were operating under the former law will be subject to the legal interpretations offered by the Montana Supreme Court today in these recent cases. Got that? Let me just restate. 4 years ago, you were running a dispensary because, according to the medical marijuana law, you were a caregiver and you could caregive for people and be able to get them their medicine. Today, the Supreme Court says, no, that you can't do that. That's against the law. Statute of limitations is 5 years. The prosecutor can go back to you running that thing 4 years ago and prosecute you for the way that the law has been decided today. Yeah, Yeah, so this is pretty serious, people. So let me give you some idea of, even if we do get this initiative referendum passed, what the changes will be. The first case is a case called State v. Johnson. This was decided on May 8th of this year. And the bottom line in this one, again, mtcia.org, the blog source for this, the protections of the original medical marijuana law only apply when a patient obtains marijuana from his or her listed caregiver. You can only get and be protected for your medical marijuana if you're getting it from the person you listed as your caregiver, not from some dispensary, some other place, some other caregiver. So it's one of those cases of not a caregiver, but the caregiver, the person you're registered with. Now, the reason this came to light was there was a traffic stop in Park County. Was pulled over, was with possession of an ounce of marijuana, proved to be a medical marijuana patient, but they investigated and they found that the medical marijuana caregiver didn't give the marijuana to the patient. The patient got it from another source because the current provider wasn't up and running, so got charged for criminal possession of dangerous drug. The judges found them guilty in the original case. District court, they tried to dismiss it, saying, well, you're medical, right? You're medical. But the Supreme Court determined that despite the clear language of the law, when you read all the rest of the law, it said that the Medical Marijuana Act limited patients to possession of marijuana provided by their listed caregiver. Therefore, marijuana a person possesses is not protected by the former law if it was obtained from a source that was not the patient's caregiver. So, what? Does this mean now patients in Montana are going to have to carry papers around? These are my receipts to prove that I got it from... Our caregiver is going to have to tag it somehow to prove that this is the marijuana for John Smith. Well, we'll have to see. Another case in Montana, MMGA versus Corrigan. This was decided on July 6th of this year. Caregivers cannot provide marijuana to other caregivers or work for them and perform duties consistent with medical use on their behalf under the former medical marijuana law. So this is pretty much going to kill any sort of dispensary operation that was under the idea that I've got these people working for me, these, whoever I hire to work for me, and they're acting as my agents. This idea of agency, you're working on behalf of someone else, and in doing so, they are also providing care, being caregivers by helping grow. Nah, that's all gone. That's not going to be the way it works under here. And the Supreme Court ruled in Montana that the caregivers may not transact with other caregivers. So one caregiver cannot get starts from another, cannot get seeds from another in that case. Now, the reason why they decided this is because they relied on the part where you're signing to get your card in Montana. And when you sign a statement that says, as a caregiver, that you will only provide marijuana to qualifying patients who have named named you as the caregiver, right? So you can't give starts to another caregiver. They're not your patient. You can only give medicine to your patient, right? So that's going to destroy any sort of dispensary type operation. And now the counter argument was, well, look, if you don't let a caregiver get a seed from somebody or a start from somebody, what, are you supposed to wait for the weed fairy to drop it in their lap to help their patient? Well, the Supreme Court was not persuaded by that because of the clear, quote, clear and unambiguous language of you can only give marijuana to your patient. Clear and unambiguous, despite the fact that in a logical world it doesn't work. That's the law. That's the way it's written. And the further argument that this rule is not changed when the caregivers are in an employment relationship does not change the restriction. So again, this applies to the sale or transfer of marijuana between caregivers or even people working for caregivers. Not going to work anymore. And the third case in Montana, State v. Perello. This just came down July 20th. And folks, you're going to see more decisions like this if other states start to see how this one got through. Hashish and presumably keef, as well as hash oil, are not considered usable marijuana under the Medical Marijuana Act, under Montana's Medical Marijuana Act. Now, this happened. A guy was stopped to change a flat tire on I-90. Cop stopped there, smelled marijuana from the car, noticed the driver had red eyes, found this guy had several bags of marijuana, several joints, and 2 bottles of hash oil. Guy was from Washington. Charged with felony possession for the hash oil. On appeal, he said, well, on medical marijuana law, there's an exception for usable marijuana. And usable marijuana is defined as any mixture or preparation of marijuana, and that should include hash and hash oil. Now, the Supreme Court ruled against that That's right. Supreme Court ruled against it because it said the medical marijuana law doesn't define marijuana. The Medical Marijuana Act defines usable marijuana as the dried leaves and flowers of marijuana and any mixture or preparation of marijuana. So you'd think, oh, any preparation of marijuana, hash is a preparation of marijuana. Here's the problem. Marijuana is defined in the Controlled Substances Act. Nowhere in the Montana Medical Marijuana Act did they put a specific definition of what marijuana itself was. So it has to rely on the Controlled Substances Act, which has a definition for marijuana and has a separate definition for hashish. So the Supreme Court said, in order for something to be usable marijuana, it must qualify as marijuana, which was not defined in the Medical Marijuana Act, but in the criminal provisions found in the Controlled Substances Act. Because hashish was separately defined, it does not qualify as usable marijuana as defined in the Medical Marijuana Act itself. Haha. So hashish is felony time, even for patients, hash oil, and presumably keef, even if they pass this referendum, or reject this referendum, if they all vote no on it and go back to the original medical marijuana law, no hash, no caregiver exchanging, and you can only possess the marijuana that your caregiver brought to you. You can find all this at Montana Cannabis Industries Association blog, mtcia.org. Pretty amazing stuff, people. And this just highlights why medical doesn't go far enough. We have to keep fighting for the true freedom we all deserve. We have to keep fighting for the right of any adult to do with their body what they choose, and that includes using the plants that come out of the ground. It's time to legalize marijuana for everyone. We're going to do it. Stay with us.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
For Wiz Khalifa and Cannabis Carry, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Stick around for Hour 2 Toker Talk Radio coming up next. And then at 8 o'clock, Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. For everyone here, thanks for being with us. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
You grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.